The death of Arthur McDuffy and the McDuffie riots. Prelude to tragedy. Arthur McDuffy was a 33-year-old African-American insurance salesman and former Marine living in Miami, Florida. Known for his affable nature and commitment to his family, Arthur's life was brutally cut short under harrowing circumstances that would forever scar the city of Miami. On the night of December 17, 1979, Arthur McDuffy was returning home from visiting a friend. Riding his motorcycle, he attracted the attention of police officers who began a high-speed chase through the streets of Miami. The chase lasted approximately 8 minutes before McDuffy was cornered. At the scene, McDuffy was forcibly removed from his motorcycle. With his hands handcuffed behind his back, he was subjected to a relentless and merciless beating by several police officers. They used heavy flashlights, known as Kell lights, and nightsticks, crushing his skull and causing severe injuries. The officers then attempted to cover up their crime by making it appear as though McDuffy's injuries were the result of a motorcycle accident. A night of horror. McDuffy's brutalization was a scene of nightmarish violence. As the officers descended upon him, one officer swung a Kell light with all his might, the heavy metal flashlight making a sickening thud as it connected with McDuffy's skull. The force of the blow split his scalp open, blood pouring down his face in torrents. His screams of agony echoed in the night, but they were quickly silenced by another savage strike. Pinned to the ground, McDuffy could barely move as another officer took a nightstick and repeatedly drove it into his ribs, each impact producing a crack as bones broke under the relentless assault. They beat him with such ferocity that his body convulsed involuntarily. Blood mixed with dirt on the ground, forming a gruesome mud beneath him. One officer, straddling McDuffy, used the butt of his flashlight to pummel his face, the force smashing his nose and causing his eyes to swell shut. With his hands bound and no means of defense, McDuffy could only endure the onslaught, his moans of pain growing weaker with each blow. The brutality continued unabated, with officers taking turns, their faces twisted in rage, seemingly deriving pleasure from the act. As the beating reached its zenith, one officer lifted McDuffy's head by his hair, exposing the battered and bloodied visage to the dim streetlight. Another officer, wielding a heavy baton, swung it down with such force that it crushed McDuffy's skull, a gruesome splatter of blood and brain matter staining the pavement. The aftermath. McDuffy was taken to Jackson Memorial Hospital, the same hospital where his wife Frederica worked. The scene in the emergency room was one of sheer horror. McDuffy's injuries were so severe that his face was an unrecognizable mass of swollen, bloodied flesh. His skull was fractured in multiple places, with shards of bone protruding through the skin. His eyes were grotesquely swollen shut, and his once distinctive features were obliterated by the savage beating. The doctors fought to save him, but the extent of his injuries was overwhelming. His brain was irreparably damaged, swollen from the trauma, and bleeding profusely. Surgeons drilled holes into his skull in a desperate attempt to relieve the pressure, but it was a futile effort. His body was a canvas of brutality, with deep lacerations and contusions covering his arms, legs, and torso. Every inch of him bore the mark of the relentless assault. Frederica McDuffie, arriving at the hospital, was confronted with a scene that no wife should ever endure. The sight of her husband, once a strong and vibrant man, now reduced to a lifeless, mangled figure, was too much to bear. She collapsed in grief, her cries echoing through the sterile halls of the hospital. McDuffy succumbed to his injuries on December 21, 1979. The official cause of death was severe head trauma, but the true cause was the unbridled hatred and brutality of those sworn to protect and serve. The officers involved were initially suspended but later reinstated. Despite the clear evidence of their heinous actions, they maintained that McDuffy had crashed his motorcycle and resisted arrest, a blatant lie in the face of overwhelming evidence. The trial and acquittal. The trial of the officers was moved to Tampa, Florida, a predominantly white and conservative area, raising concerns about the fairness of the proceedings. On May 3, 1980, after a brief deliberation, the all-white jury acquitted the officers of all charges.
Not guilty.
This verdict ignited a powder keg of pent-up frustration and anger in Miami's black community. The McDuffie Riots. The acquittal led to 3 days of intense and violent riots in Miami, primarily in the neighborhoods of Liberty City and Overtown. The rage was palpable as buildings were set ablaze, stores looted, and streets filled with chaos. A scene of unimaginable carnage. As news of the acquittal spread, an enraged crowd gathered on the streets of Liberty City. The air was thick with tension, an oppressive heat radiating from the asphalt. A group of young black men, faces contorted with fury, stormed through the neighborhood. The sound of shattering glass echoed as they hurled bricks and bottles through store windows. An unsuspecting white man, oblivious to the brewing storm, found himself cornered by the mob. Their anger, long simmering, erupted violently. They dragged him from his car, the sound of his screams piercing the night as they beat him relentlessly. Fists, feet, and makeshift weapons rained down upon him, each blow fueled by years of pent-up frustration and rage. Nearby, a car was overturned and set ablaze. The flames roared, casting an eerie glow on the surrounding chaos. The acrid smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled the air, mingling with the cries of pain and fury. The rioters moved with a terrifying coordination, their destruction methodical and unrelenting. On another street, a young black girl, Shanrika Perry, was struck by a speeding car as it swerved to avoid the rioting crowd. Her leg was severed in the impact, the sight of her bloodied limb lying in the street sending shockwaves through the witnesses. The child was quickly taken to the hospital, her life hanging in the balance as chaos reigned around her. A group of rioters spotted a police officer attempting to control the mayhem. They descended upon him with a vengeance, pummeling him with such force that his cries for help were drowned out by the collective roar of the crowd. The officer's baton was turned against him, and within moments, his uniform was soaked with his own blood. Buildings that had stood for decades were reduced to smoldering ruins. Flames licked the night sky, casting a hellish glow over the devastation. The once thriving streets of Liberty City became a war zone, the ground littered with debris and the injured. The legacy. Arthur McDuffie's death and the subsequent riots highlighted the deep-seated racial tensions and systemic injustices faced by African Americans in Miami and across the United States. The case became a symbol of police brutality and the failure of the justice system to protect black lives. Personal reflections. Frederica McDuffie, Arthur's wife, was left to grapple with the immense loss and trauma. The brutal killing of her husband shattered her family and left an indelible mark on her and her children. Arthur's daughter, who was only a child at the time, struggled to understand the violence and hatred that led to her father's death. The community, too, was deeply affected. The riots, while destructive, were a desperate cry for justice and recognition. They underscored the profound sense of betrayal and injustice felt by Miami's black residents. Conclusion. The story of Arthur McDuffie's death and the McDuffie riots is a tragic chapter in American history. It serves as a grim reminder of the consequence of racial injustice and the urgent need for systemic change. The pain and devastation experienced by McDuffie's family and the community at large echo the ongoing struggle for equality and justice in the United States. Arthur Lee McDuffie was more than a victim of police brutality. He was a beloved husband, father, and a respected member of his community. A former Marine, McDuffie served his country with honor and carried the same dedication into his civilian life. As an insurance salesman, he was known for his warm and engaging personality, always ready to lend a helping hand to those in need. His tragic death left a void that could never be filled, but his life remains a testament to the resilience and dignity of a man who deserves so much more. As we reflect on Arthur McDuffie's life, we honor his memory by continuing the fight against the systemic racism and brutality that claimed his life. His legacy is a call to action, a powerful reminder that true justice can only be achieved when every individual, regardless of race, is treated with dignity and respect. May Arthur Lee McDuffie rest in peace, and may his story inspire a future where justice prevails and such tragedies are no more.